Welcome to The Smart Divorce on Divorce Source Radio, helping you move forward with focus, hope, and confidence, saving you time, money, and your sanity as you build a better life post-divorce. I'm Steve Peck. Deborah Moskovich, divorce consultant, educator, and author of The Smart Divorce, brings you the leading experts and researchers in the field of divorce, and also speaks with those in the trenches, people that have learned from their divorce and how their experiences changed their lives. And they would tell you for the better. Deborah's learned that divorce can be a beginning, even if it looks like an end. Divorce can be rich in opportunity to learn and grow from. And on the Smart Divorce Radio Show, we'll explore how to take this information to create a positive post-divorce life. And now, here's Deborah.
Steve, do you ever think about why the divorce rate rises with each subsequent marriage?
I do. Do you have an answer?
Yeah, I don't think that people think hard enough in terms of the partner that they're picking. You know, the people seem to choose that same personality type over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. The divorce rate for first-time marriages across North America is roughly 50%. When it comes to second divorce or more, it rises to a staggering 67%.
Oh my!
I think that's or more. Now, you know, a big part of that, blending families is an issue, but another issue is not picking the right partner and not having specific conversations in terms of what are your social values, things to consider in terms of retirement, finances. People don't talk about all of these things, and then they get married and they think, well, we'll work it through. And oftentimes, if there are differences in philosophies, working it through means divorce.
Yeah. Why don't we talk about that more?
I think people are afraid that the relationship is going to break down. But the truth is, if the relationship is going to break down, then that's not the right partner for you. And again, it's going back to that same personality type, that same partner. I don't know, why do people need to pick? If you were with someone that was controlling or domineering and that didn't work for you, why do you keep on going back to that same person over and over and over again? It's repeating those same patterns. You know, for some reason, people just seem to fall into that same personality trap. And I think that there needs to be a lot more introspection. So what I would really love, listeners, is that once you go through divorce or a relationship breakdown, I'm not saying that you have to go for therapy, but you do something. Either you do the personal work that you need to do, or you talk it out with a neutral third party, but something so that you can really understand what your contribution might have been to that relationship breakdown, what you think that relationship broke down as a result of, you know, so many things. That if that person's not right for you, they're just not right for you. Just because you're lonely or you want to be in that Noah's Ark world of a couple, if that's not the right relationship, you know what? Move on.
Oh, for sure.
So that's what we want to talk about today. And our guest is Susan Pease Gadoua. Now, I do know that you interviewed her previously, but we are going to talk about relationship patterns and what's happiness. And look at life post-divorce. Like, what is it that you need to do to move on, to really build a positive, happy, content, smart life?
Sounds good. And what a deep question. What is happiness?
What is it?
Susan, welcome to Divorce Source Radio's Smart Divorce with Deborah Moskovich.
Hi, thank you.
Susan, it's such a pleasure to have you on. I've been reading your articles in the Huffington Post and what you're doing with your Dream Divorce team. But today I really want to talk about happiness and what that means and what people need to do for happy relationships and great relationships and why they fall into the same relationship traps. And we would like to help them today to fall out of those relationship traps. So let's start with the question of, what is happiness?
Deep question.
Well, I think that happiness is not something that people attain by getting the big house or getting the ring on their finger or the particular job. I think it's actually a byproduct of living in integrity and living what we would think of as the right way. So, for example, giving back to others and you know, it's really something that you get as a way of living the right way, not as I've nailed down all the possessions I can gather.
That's true. You can go out and have that fabulous cruise and buy that piece of bling or a great dress, but at the end of the day, you get your Visa bill, and all of a sudden that high is very low.
Yes, it's very short-lived. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's helpful. So how do you think people need to reframe their thinking then to look at, it's not about things, but it's almost like looking at the inner, what would you say, your inner life, or
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you'd phrase it.
Well, it's such an important and huge question that you're asking in terms of one of the things that I've seen happen is people think that if I get into or out of this marriage, I will be happy, only to find that that isn't where the happiness was. And I do think that in the Western culture, we're trained basically to believe that it's around the corner and it's outside of ourselves. So the unfortunate part is it's not. And so those things the actions we take aren't going to get us the happiness. So I heard it said once, happiness is an inside job. And I really like that because it's really about getting to know ourselves better. I have seen this happen time and time again in working with couples and individuals where when they begin to be more accepting and loving of themselves, it's amazing and miraculous. Their relationships change and become better because we do tend to treat other people the way we treat ourselves. So if we're not happy inside, we're not going to be happy in the relationship.
You know what? That's an excellent point because, when you think about it, you have to be happy with yourself before you can get into really healthy relationships. I remember at the very beginning of my divorce, I was probably, because I was sad and experiencing all these emotions, I don't necessarily think that I was bringing in the healthiest people into my life for me. Mm-hmm. They were great people, but once I started to heal and feel better about myself, I don't know what it was. It's like I was projecting a different kind of aura. And I was all of a sudden connecting with really fabulous people. So the better I felt about myself, mm-hmm. the better quality or I was connecting with people that really made a difference in my life.
It's uncanny how that happens, but it is true.
So what I want to say to listeners then is, if you are feeling low and you think, is this all there is? No, it's not all there is. There's really light at the end of the tunnel. And I know that sounds so cliche, but mm-hmm. It's the truth. It's the truth. You just have to get through it to see what's there.
I think one of the best parts of my job in working with people from beginning stages of divorce through post-divorce is that I actually do get to witness them come to that place of happiness and fulfillment that they maybe weren't getting in the marriage. And I do think that when people are going through divorce, they tend to fear that their life is always going to be challenging and hard and awful and lonely and all those kind of negative things, only to find out that once they do get through to the other side, it starts to, the sun shines again, and they can actually do more than they thought they could, and the world gets bigger again.
It's just that we're all so impatient, we want it all now. I want to feel better now, please.
Exactly.
Well, that's the problem. We're a fast food society. Everything has to be delivered within minutes.
I was that way when I was going through my divorce. When we went to counseling, my methodology was I want to go 2-hour sessions 3 times a week. Let's fix this as fast as possible. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was where I was coming from.
And what happened?
It didn't work.
It's amazing. Yeah, and I say this to people too, that we can have this conversation and you can have a realization about something that will make you happy, but it's not like you can actually walk out the door and begin to practice it. It's a process and it takes time, and it's like any new habit that you really have to keep practicing it to make it your default mechanism. But it is possible.
And you need to be introspective. Like, you really have to experience certain things and see certain things in life to really understand what it means to you. And the other important thing is, don't wait for happiness to happen. I often hear people say, when I lose 10 pounds, then I'm going to do X. And when I'm happy, I'm going to do Y. But if you start doing those things now, you start going to the gym now, you start eating healthy, you kick some bad habits, it's amazing how the happiness follows. Like, it just sort of falls into place.
Right. And another thing that I see people do in relationships is pin their happiness on their mate and say, you're not making me happy, you're not fulfilling me. And they also do the counter to that is to blame their spouse in a divorce or their soon-to-be ex of, you're doing this to me. And I think that when we can look at our part in a dynamic and take responsibility, that is the beginning. It's like the seeds for happiness, because we realize it's in our own hands.
Right. Okay, well, here's another really heavy question. People say you have to love yourself before you can truly love someone else and be in a great relationship. Can you explain that a little bit?
That's been tough for me to get my head around, too. Loving yourself, what does that really mean?
Well, as human beings, and these are very heavy, good questions. As human beings, we have everything it is to be human. So we have positive and negative qualities. And what we want to identify with, unless we're psychopathic, is the good qualities. And we want people to like us, and we want to be good in the world. And the reality is we all have negative. We all have evil thoughts. We all have just things that we'd rather not. And the key to liking yourself and loving yourself is actually embracing all those parts of you, positive and negative. And what I talk about really is it's basically coming into balance with yourself when you know that you can be generous, but you also can be greedy, and accept that about yourself. You're a more balanced person.
I like that. I think that's true. I think that you do need to find some way to balance out your life.
Mm-hmm. I want to check in with Steve on that. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, we did a show on meaning versus reality, and how when we go through these situations, a lot of time it's the false meaning that we attach to it. It's not the reality. Right.
And we think that people aren't going to like us if something shows up, when in fact, and I'll give an example, because I had a conversation yesterday with someone that felt like she had to be nice. And what she said was, she realized when there are other people who are too nice, she doesn't like them. She's suspicious of them. When there are people who are nice, but they also, say what they want and sort of have a confidence, she likes them. So it's ironic.
Yeah.
It's like you're finding your authentic self. Just being true to yourself. But you know what else I've learned, and this is going through the dating phase, or just, with other people, and you think you have a connection with someone, or you like someone and they don't like you back, and then you feel bad about it. But, the truth is, it's not always about you, but it could be about the other person. And it took me a long time to learn that. Maybe there was something in my lifestyle that didn't work with their lifestyle. Like maybe, I wasn't the athlete skier that they were looking for, the athlete tennis player, or, whatever, who knows what it is. But it's not necessarily about you. It's a lot of times it's about the other person.
Yeah, I have a saying around that it's not what happens to you that matters. It's what you tell yourself about what happens to you. So in that example, Deborah, someone doesn't call you back, if you're getting on yourself about, they don't like me, I'm not likable, I did this, I said that wrong, that's an indication that you don't love yourself. But if you say, well, maybe they're busy, then it's an example of how you're not taking it personally and you're not denigrating yourself.
Well, if you are acting insecure, could that mean you don't love yourself?
It does, absolutely. Now, I say that, again, we're human, and there are going to be situations in which we are more insecure than others. But if you're constantly insecure and you're trying to get people to like you, then I do believe it's an indication that you do not like yourself. Again, you're looking for that external validation.
Yeah, because when you're really acting secure, you don't really care about all that other stuff.
Right, and you don't want to be so secure that you don't care at all. Anything in an extreme is not good.
Okay.
No,
right?
But you never really know what's going on in someone's head, and it doesn't even have to be related to relationships. I remember going back, several months ago, and just getting into like this knockdown argument with, one of my children, and I was just so frustrated. And they said, "Mommy, like, how come you're so mad?" And then I said, and I sort of stepped back and said, "You know what? I'm really, really, really sorry. I just like crashed my whole computer today, and I just had to I've lost some really important files." So it was like, I was just having like the most horrendous day, so upset, so frustrated, and I just took it out on my kids, which was like the worst thing. And so you never really know what's going on in someone else's life.
Right. That's very true. And again, we're human, and those things do happen. But when we have more insight into who we are and acceptance, for example, I don't know that you did this, but let's just say you said, "I can't get mad at that. That's just not okay for me to be mad." Well, the anger doesn't go away, and it actually festers and then blows up later on. So if you, on the other hand, had said, "Well, I'm really mad," it doesn't need to blow up.
That's a real good point, because how many relationships have this anger underneath the surface festering all the time? And it has to blow up, right?
Yeah. They've done studies that show that actually it's the couples who don't fight that have a higher chance of divorce.
That's what I heard. And so, you see, that just goes to show how important communication really is. And
owning that you have those feelings. There's nothing wrong with it.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's just having it and saying, "This is how I feel," and not having to apologize for how you feel, and expressing it in a healthy way.
Right. You don't always have to agree with your partner. Like, you could have differing opinions on something. It's just in the way you express it. And I think that's a lesson that people have to learn, is how to express differences without hurting someone's feelings, and, doing it in a very nice way.
Well, and in a way that they can hear it. Because, again, if it's too nice, then people are suspicious. Right?
True. So now that we talked about loving yourself and what you need to do and finding your authentic self, you know the saying, "I love you, but I'm not in love with you"?
It's a classic.
It's a classic. What do you say to that one?
Well, I think that points to what people's, especially when they're using that as a way to break up with someone. I've come across a lot of different thoughts on that from people, and it's basically what your expectation of what marriage is supposed to do for you. So in one couple that I'm working with, the woman is fine to not have that much communication with her husband and not be best friends and not have a physical relationship, whereas the husband very much feels like his wife should be his best friend and they should have a closer relationship. So there's a tension there. There's a difference in expectation. And so the person who thinks that I'm not, that this person's not my best friend is the person who's likely to say, "I'm not in love with you." And that's their reason for leaving. But if you don't have that expectation, it doesn't matter if you're in love, as long as you love the person.
Do you think that people really understand, like especially when you're really young, you get these couples getting together in their early 20s, making the commitment to spend the rest of their lives together. Do you think they really understand what love is?
Does anyone really understand what love is?
Those are great. You guys are going way deep today. No, but I think it actually, I think it gets back to how well do you know and love and accept yourself? And then, that will help you have a different definition of love. So if, again, I'm looking for outside acceptance, or I'm getting married because I'm supposed to, that's not really what it's all about. Or I should say it's probably not going to last. Doesn't have a good prognosis.
No, absolutely. I guess in those or those relationships that do last, but you know that they're not really happy, it's the good enough marriage.
Right.
You know, I spoke with a sociologist, Paul Amato, on that, you know, and how marriage and relationships have evolved and changed over the last 50 years. And it's quite interesting, you know, what people were looking for way back when, you know, say 50 years ago, and what they were looking for today. You know, I think people today want someone to complete them, whatever that means.
Well, and Stephanie Coons has a great line on that. And basically her thinking is that we've raised the bar on marriage to a point where it's relatively impossible to reach it, but then we make people wrong when they can't reach it. So we're expecting so much of marriage to the point where it's probably not possible. And then we call them failed marriages when they don't work.
Yeah, I don't like that term. And I also don't like the term broken, you know, like a broken family. There's certain terms that society refers to that makes you feel so bad, like such an outcast.
And I have to say that I'm one of those that feels that fail word in regards to my relationship.
So you feel like you failed or it failed?
Yeah, I guess both. And I think that a lot of our listeners have that feeling too.
Well, I guess we need to define failure then too, just like we define happiness. So, you know, if failure equals the marriage didn't last, then yeah, that is failure. But if you define failure as not learning the lesson that you needed to, not healing the wound that you needed to, that's a whole different thing. Mm-hmm. So then it doesn't matter what the outcome of the relationship is. I mean, really, Deborah Ford writes a book, The Spiritual Divorce, that talks about how we can actually learn and grow from relationships ending.
That's true. I do find that when one relationship ends, I seem to get into a better relationship the next time around. Like, I just learned so much from that past relationship. And probably because I'm learning a lot about me.
Right. You learned about yourself and what's true and authentic for you.
Yeah.
And that's because you sought that. But think about the statistics, right? From 50% in first marriages to 67% in second and more. So someone's not getting the message. Someone's not doing the work.
Yeah. I think the trend is to continue to look outside the relationship. So it isn't there, and that's why it can't sustain itself.
Well, I think a big problem is people are falling into this relationship trap. They keep on marrying that same personality type over and over again. And if it didn't work the first time, why do you think it's going to work the second or the third time?
Well, they either marry the same or 180 degrees from the same, which then creates the same dynamic. So it's very true. So someone who says, my father was a rageaholic, I'm not going to marry a rageaholic, and they marry someone who's extremely passive, well, that person often becomes the rageaholic because their spouse is so passive. No. So it's ironic.
Jeez.
You know?
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I don't know. They like the excitement or something. Because really when they find the right person, it can be so boring to them.
That's true. There's no drama. It's easy.
Isn't that kind of nice, not having drama? I don't know. I like that.
I think it's a function of maturity, for one thing. And I also do think that we get fed stories about this passionate love, and it's almost like a drug, and people are seeking a high, and again it's what we call chasing the high.
I remember when I first started out dating, I had like this little box of the box of what people had, what men had to fit into in terms of who they were, what they did, what they looked like, blah, like this big list. And anything outside of that box wasn't right. But I realized that, you've got to sort of think outside that box, because probably what's in that box isn't going to last a lifetime. That isn't going to make that relationship last a lifetime.
Let me ask you a question about that. So it sounds like maybe the box was really about you not accepting all the parts of yourself, and the more accepting you became of yourself, then you could let go of the box.
Absolutely, 100%. You're absolutely right. The more confident I felt in myself, the more I could let go.
Right.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, it has made a huge difference in my relationship. Huge.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the partner I'm with today is certainly not someone I thought I would be with, and it's the best relationship ever. So there you have it. So in terms of that, then, so how do you help people see that they should think outside the box? Not that they should, that they might consider thinking outside the box and stop them from falling into those same relationship traps. You know, there's people that I talk to that have been married more than once, and it seems to be that they're marrying that same controlling type person or passive, whatever that personality type is. They keep on being attracted to that person. What do you tell them?
Well, I think there are three main reasons why we get into relationship. One is because it's comfortable or familiar. Two is because we are trying to find balance. So a spender and a saver often hook up, or an emotional and an intellectual will hook up. And the third is to heal old wounds. And those are not bad things or bad reasons. They're all good. It's just that if we're not conscious, meaning we're not aware of who we are, what we're bringing, how we are out of balance, then we're going to find another person that is out of balance. I do triangles. I like this image of an isosceles triangle that can't be balanced on its own. It needs another half, the bottom half of the, to make the square, to make it be balanced. Whereas an equilateral triangle can merge with someone and then come apart, but either way, they're balanced. They don't need the other person. And what the thing to look at, too, is the equilateral and the isosceles triangle would never hook up. They have no way to bond, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Interesting. Steve, what do you think?
Triangles. Wow.
Geometry.
Yeah. I didn't do well in that class, but I do get your point.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so then let me ask you this question.
Okay.
What makes someone want to stay in a marriage or leave it when the marriage is troubled? Like, through your counseling, obviously you see couples at varying levels of conflict. And how do you know when you should stay or when you should leave?
Well, that's not a simple, I love, so deep today. It's not I don't have a simple answer for that, but what I do like to help people in my book, Contemplating Divorce, I talk about looking for the solution inside the marriage first, inside yourself first, then inside the marriage. And then if your partner's not working with you and there are situations such as betrayals, affairs, things like that are continuing to happen, then you really don't have what I call a workable marriage. And I give the workability factors. So let's say there's a breach of trust. If both people are willing to, for example, go to therapy and work on and talk about that breach, then it's probably workable. If one person is not willing to work on it, then it's not.
Yeah. It takes two to marry and one to divorce.
Absolutely.
So once this couple is done, they've divorced, oftentimes people seem to rebound into a new relationship pretty quickly. What are the risks of getting involved with someone new too quickly?
Well, I think that it's the cliche of the rebound relationship where, again, the gap between having someone there 24/7 to nobody can be so big that someone might want to just fill that gap with the next living, breathing person that walks by, and it ultimately doesn't turn out to be the right relationship. The other part of that is, again, getting into a relationship with another person really quickly is a way to not look at yourself. And by not looking at yourself, you're not going to be learning. First, you're not going to be grieving, which is an important part of getting over divorce, and you're not going to be looking at your part in where the relationship had the breakdown. So it's a quick fix. It's, again, that high. It is fun to be in a new relationship, and it's a nice distraction. But it's, again, very short-lived, and most likely it's why those statistics get higher as you go into second and third marriages.
Now, how can you tell when you haven't worked through a particular issue?
It keeps showing up. So let's say I had a very interesting experience in my own life where I was actually disowning some of my power, my strength. And I used to be the person that wanted to be the wallflower. And at a certain point in my life, I found that I kept attracting very powerful women in my life. And of course, they were intimidating, and it was not an easy thing for me to look at. But after, about the fifth person, I started to say, wait a minute, there's got to be a reason that I keep bringing these people into my life, or these situations keep happening. And sure enough, I uncovered the fact that it was my own confidence and my own power that I had disowned. So honestly, when I started to integrate it into myself more, love it, accept it, not be afraid of my power, I actually started attracting more balanced people.
Yeah, I experienced that as well. I don't think it was as intellectual in terms of how I evaluated it, but it's like how I felt about life, or how I felt about myself and everything else. And I seemed to draw in different types of people at different points in my life.
Right. And that gets back to the point of bringing people in so we can heal parts of us that still need to be healed.
Then that actually begs the question, what's important for couples to work on? Why is it important for couples to work on themselves even when they don't plan to stay together?
Well, no matter what, the world benefits when each of us works on ourselves. And Michael Jackson's song, looking at the man in the mirror, is, again, it's cliche, but it really is true that everybody benefits, especially when a couple has to co-parent. The more insight they have to what their wants and needs and what their authentic self is, and the better they can communicate that, the better co-parenting relationship they're going to have. And it just goes from there. The better work relationship, neighbor relationship.
Don't you find that some people just find it so hard to really look at themselves? They don't want to look. They don't want to really see beyond the surface.
Some can't.
They can't.
Yeah. Well, generally, those aren't the people that come into therapy, right?
Right.
So
we don't need it.
Yeah. But there certainly are crises or things that happen that make people look for help outside. And I think that there are many people who will go to their grave and will not have, looked under the covers at themselves. But I think that life has a way of, actually, I have another phrase, and I call it being tenderized. So, when you take a piece of meat and you want to tenderize it, you're basically beating the crap out of it, right?
Yeah.
You're killing it again.
We're not going to bleep you.
Okay. But that's what happens, I think, with life, is that we get these situations that make us look at ourselves. Or we always have the choice, but they call us to look at ourselves. Let's put it that way. And if we don't, I believe the universe cranks up the volume. So we'll have to look at it the next time. And it goes from there, I think.
Except what about if you're in a relationship, like you are an individual that's really introspective and you're with someone who really doesn't want to look at themselves? Someone who, if there is any kind of disconnect in the relationship, any kind of disharmony, you want to go for counseling and your partner won't go, absolutely refuses. What do you do?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I may be wrong, but I'm a betting woman on this, that's a relationship that when they first got together, neither person wanted to look at themselves, or they had an unspoken agreement that was okay. And they were both isosceles triangles, and one of the people in the relationship became an equilateral triangle. And I know you hate geometry, Steve, but it's a case where if the other person doesn't ultimately become an equilateral triangle and look at themselves, the relationship probably isn't going to last, and maybe it shouldn't. And again, it's not a failed relationship because somebody grew, and I don't see that as a failure. I think anytime we can help enlighten ourselves and other people, the world is a better place. Absolutely. And I think that the fact that you guys are doing shows like this is really wonderful.
Well, I think it goes to show that, like, I truly believe, and I say this all the time, divorce is rich in opportunity to learn and grow from. Mm-hmm. And it's true, I guess. Those are the listeners that are tuning in week after week or day after day, downloading the different podcasts and, reading what you have to say, Susan, or listening to what I have to say, or reading my books, because they want to know how they can grow, and how they can heal and how they can move on. And it's that information that and it's how you use that information.
Mm-hmm, exactly. I do want to say, I think it's ironic. I started doing this work in the year 2000, and there was virtually nothing out there for people who wanted and needed emotional and mental support through a divorce. So I love the fact that there are more. I mean, there's some of these programs on TV, divorce rehab and things like that I'm not sure how much people are learning in a good way from that, but certainly programs and the missions that we all have, I think, are hopefully going to help people.
Any parting thoughts for our listeners?
Well, just again, the goal is to become an equilateral triangle, and to really look at your part in the relationship, whether it's a relationship that's in trouble and possibly can endure, or whether it's one that's ending and you're moving into the next phase of your life. You're the common denominator in all your relationships. And so just to really, I encourage people to do more inner work.
Susan, can you briefly tell us about your book and a website where our listeners can get a hold of you?
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you. I actually have a couple books. My first book is called Contemplating Divorce, and I have a special website just for that book, www.contemplatingdivorce.com. And then I also wrote a book last year called Stronger Day by Day. And it's in line with what we're talking about in the sense that it's sort of a meditation, inspirational book for people to look at their part, and talks about things like anger and hating your spouse, but also forgiveness and recovery and challenges and gifts and all that. So people can find that at changingmarriage.com. That's another website that I have. So follow us on the Huffington Post. Deborah and I are writing for them, and it's a wonderful resource as well.
Well, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. I really learned something from you, and I think I'm going to find a little bit more happiness today.
That's great. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate you having me on.
And thanks again to Susan Pease Gadoua for being a guest on The Smart Divorce on Divorce Source Radio. If you'd like to send us a comment or question, we'd love to hear from you. Write us at divorcesourceradio@gmail.com, or you can phone your question into our voicemail listener line at area code 248-686-2256. And be sure to check out the entire podcast archive. And while you're there, click on the Facebook icon and join the growing Divorce Source Radio community. If you'd like to be notified when new programs will be available, you can follow us on Twitter. Our follow word is Divorce Source. For Deborah Moskovich, I'm Steve Peck. Have a great week.